Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 791. Shall not go against you. The thick spiritual qi that had surrounded Mei Shuayan's little frame vanished. She absorbed all of it into her body and turned into her own powers. The surrounding spiritual qi no longer gushed over. The practice had reached bottleneck point. She needed to practice even more steadily so that she could break through and advance into the next stage of cultivation. But such progress speed left Mei Shuayan unusually surprised. This cultivation speed was too fast. Although there was no day or night in the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shuayan could still tell that she had not been practicing for a long period, 3 to 5 days at most. In these few days, she had forged ahead vigorously from a level lower than a regular Xian beast to a third-level peak. This speed was a little too terrifying. Although this had clearly occurred to her, Mei Shuayan still felt as though she was dreaming time to time. It was truly too wonderful. Looking at the dense, misty spiritual qi in the surrounding, she felt as if she were in an immortal realm. There was no other reasons. With her many years of experience, even when she was at the peak of her cultivation level, even the spiritual qi gathered in the place most abundant in spiritual qi in Tian Fa forest could not compare to even 1% of the concentration of the spiritual qi in here. A world of a difference. Mei Shuayan roughly estimated that the difference in the concentration of the spiritual qi of both places was more than 100 times. Although the spiritual qi in the Tian Fa forest was significantly more concentrated than the mortal world, but the quality of it was more poor. After absorbing it into the body, it still required purification before it could be absorbed into the body for her own use. But in here, it was completely pure. Completely natural. It didn't even need any purification. It was literally essence itself. If she was to really compare the concentration of the spiritual qi, perhaps the one in her original body was poorer than the one here. I spent merely a couple of days in this place at most, but I've leapt from a no level to a 4th level. I've advanced past almost 20 tiers. Although not much energy was required for such low-level advancement of Xian beasts, but leveling up at such a godly speed had never occurred in the 10,000 years of generations of Tian Fa forest. In more modern terms, it was as quick as sailing upon a rocket ship. Even Tian Fa's Saint King would be stupefied and flabbergasted upon seeing such a terrifying advancement speed. Stretching herself, Mei Shuayan observed the silent interior of the Hongjun Pagoda and climbed up the little tree. She glanced at the door of the pagoda, waiting for Jun Moxie to come out of his self-seclusion. Suddenly, she heard Jun Moxie's voice. I determine fate with my own eyes. I serve justice as I wish. Mei Shuayan perked up. This familiar voice calmed her heart suddenly, moving her and making her feel warm. A feeling like this is great. It really is. Mei Shuayan suddenly came to realize her true feelings for Jun Moxie. A flash of white appeared and Jun Moxie landed lightly before her, a wide grin on his face. Ha! Were you anxious from waiting? Mei Shuayan blinked her eyes and turned her head away, refusing to look at him. Jun Moxie was about to pick her up in his arms, only to see her disappear in a flash. Her small white body bolted around the Hongjun Pagoda at incredible speed. She squatted on the ground far away, rolling her eyes at Jun Moxie. Still planning to take advantage of me? How could it be so easy? Even if I cannot beat you and I cannot bear to bite you, I am still capable of being fast enough not to get caught by you. Jun Moxie laughed. But he wasn't in a rush to chase after her. He squatted on the ground and chuckled. You still want to run even now? Hee hee. When you've recovered, I'll carry you off to bed. Let's see how you'll run. Mei Shuayan blushed and covered her face, even hiding her white furry tail under her body. Jun Moxie laughed loudly and exited the Hongjun pagoda in a flash. He had just stepped out when he was caught by surprise. At the burial spot of Qi Tianfeng, Sa Qing Lu, and Cui Changhe, a man in black sat silently, as if he were a statue, quietly and unbudging. It was demon-eyed Saint Leng Tong. Leng Tong didn't seem surprised by Jun Moxie's sudden appearance. So you haven't left, he said indifferently. Jun Moxie looked at him cautiously and said, Do you know me? Leng Tong wore a dull smile. An inexplicable sorrow was evident on his face, and the look in his eyes was gloomy like endless swamps, completely incapable of revealing any emotions. But he spoke extremely bitterly. Looks like you aren't aware. 3 days ago, I witnessed the battle between the 5 of you. He paused before looking up at Jun Moxie. Right here. I watched you killed them. His voice turned more aggressive on that last line. I see. Jun Moxie frowned and took in a deep breath before asking, But may I ask why did Saint Leng remains waiting in this place? I didn't attack back then, and I will not attack now. The reason why I remained here is not because I was waiting for you. Leng Tong shook his head slowly, sorrow flashing across his eyes. I am here because my comrades lie beneath here. I need to guard their grave for 7 days. That is all. And this is also the only thing I, Leng Tong, can do. Since Saint Leng is such a frank person, then I shall not offer my condolences. I was the one who killed them. Saying things like that will make me seem like a hypocrite. I admit that I am not a good person, but I am no villain. I believe Saint Leng is aware of why I killed them. We are all well aware of everything regarding this matter. If Saint Leng does not wish to seek revenge, then I shall take my leave now. Leng Tong sat quietly with his head hung low, looking at the ground. He said coldly, This matter was entirely the wrong of the 3 holy lands. I couldn't find a reason to seek revenge for them. These comrades of mine are dead, and that is all there is to it. I, Leng Tong, am not someone incapable of differentiating right from wrong. And it is beneath my dignity to be involved in those unacceptable, despicable acts. Furthermore, this pathetic life of mine cannot end before the war for seizing the heavens. It is not worth it to die in your hands. He paused and turned away. Furthermore, you guys also need to participate in the war for seizing the heavens, and at only 18 years of age, you already have this level of cultivation. Your future is endless. I believe you'll live a longer life than any of us. He continued bitterly. Perhaps, in the next war for seizing the heavens, we still need you to take charge and lead everyone. I may be stupid, but I can still clearly tell this difference concerning such a crucial juncture. He raised his head and looked at Jun Moxie. So no matter what, I shall not go against you. 7 days later, I will make my way to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and quietly wait for that war for seizing the heavens in a year and 7 months' time. Everything else in the mortal realm, the gratitude and grudges of the world will no longer have anything to do with me. Leng Tong. Jun Moxie nodded. Then I shall wish you a safe and sound journey. Perhaps, a year and a half later, we may meet again. And we will have the opportunity to fight alongside each other. Leng Tong did not reply, slowly turning around to face Jun Moxie. Seemingly mumbling to himself, he said, The saints, Saint Kings of the three Holy Lands may still be able to choose the path of the greater good. But Mo Wu Dao will definitely not let the person who killed his brother off. The arrogant illusory blood sea will also not allow themselves to suffer such a great disadvantage. After this, who knows how many foul winds and bloody rain will be triggered. Perhaps seeking refuge for now is the best choice. The three Holy Lands are still unaware of what had happened here. But it can't be kept hidden for long. Sooner or later, they will learn of it. There isn't much time left. After saying this, Leng Tong continued to sit quietly, not making a single noise anymore. Jun Moxie sighed and cupped his hands. Thank you for the reminder. Take care. Then, he disappeared in a flash. Leng Tong continued to sit silently before the grave, the cold wind gently lifting the fabrics of his clothes. Sorrowful and desolate, almost as if his entire body joined the four saints that lay buried before him as one. Through that conversation with Leng Tong, Jun Moxie understood that he had spent 3 days and 3 nights in the Hongjun Pagoda. Chen Chong and the rest did not manage to send any message out, and clearly Leng Tong did not report to the three Holy Lands. In other words, he still had some buffer time. Following this train of thought, it would be half a month later when the three Holy Lands finally confirmed this news and sent out the next batch of people. And he could make all the necessary arrangements within this half a month, but the matter involving the royal family of Tian Xiang needed to be sped up. If it slowed down, then he really wouldn't have enough time to sort it out. On this journey, Jun Moxie could sense that his original Xian Qi had vanished for good. But it didn't mean that he had lost all his martial arts, because what had replaced it was some sort of mysterious energy. This energy was not as powerful as his original Xian Qi, but it was extremely flexible. This seemed to be a new starting point. Although there was no significant improvement in his skills, but his meridians had gone through a complete change. If his original spiritual qi could be compared to regular cotton threads, then this current, vague, purple qi was the silk of the divine silkworm. After this change, his meridians became extremely light and flexible, allowing him to accommodate more spiritual qi. And while the purple qi that had replaced the spiritual qi occupied a small margin of the space in there, the energy and strength it was capable of exuding was almost the same as the combined strength of his normal qi before this metamorphosis. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 792. Major change in Tian Xiang. Jun Moxie could imagine how powerful he would be if his meridians were entirely filled with this odd, purple qi. And this would require him to slowly accumulate it, bit by bit. Although he still didn't know when the next breakthrough would be, Jun Moxie could vaguely tell that it would occur when the purple qi in his meridians attained a certain level of abundance. Only then would he reach the borders of the next breakthrough. The intervals between the 5th and 6th levels were unlikely to be as brief as the previous 5 levels. This might just be a relatively long and slow cumulative process. And everything else was up to his own destiny. By the time Jun Moxie returned back to Tianxiang City, he was astonished to find out that the entire Tianxiang City was already in a state of mess. He found out after asking around that apparently the second prince's men had turned the entire capital into a state of chaos and turmoil within these 3 days. The afternoon 2 days ago, under the arrangements of Li Yuran, a few of the warriors of the second prince's residence bumped into a group of top advisors of the first prince. And very coincidentally, they had all gathered in a restaurant to feast. Then, the warriors under the second prince became drunk. One of them hurled a ball of snot in his drunken state and very coincidentally hurled it into the fish soup of the first prince's advisors. And thus, the advisors got enraged and began breaking out in strong arguments. So naturally both parties were caught in a conflict. The warriors naturally could not be as good at talking as these bunch of tacticians. But, although they couldn't win with their mouths, they could wield their weapons. So they instantly pulled out their weapons. And thus all 7 of the first prince's advisors quickly met their demise under the knives of the second prince's warriors. The first prince was infuriated upon hearing of this. How could he take this lying down? So he brought his men to settle scores with the second prince. But who knew how the negotiation between both parties went wrong, and 1,000 warriors became engaged in a battle, staining the entire palace in blood. Even the first prince couldn't escape unscathed and was hit and lost a couple of his teeth. How could he swallow this sort of insult? So he went to the emperor. But who knew what had possessed the second prince? He suddenly unsheathed his sword when they were confronting each other in court and stabbed a hole right through his own elder brother's head. Naturally, this matter had yet to come to an end, because this reality show had taken place right before the eyes of the Tian Xiang emperor. The internecine strife of the 2 princes caused their father vomit blood from anger. He ordered immediately to denounce the second prince to a commoner and lock him away in the imperial prison. The first son was stabbed to death by the second son right before him. How could anyone take a disastrous turn of familial bonds like this? On the other hand, the third prince, who had gotten this news, was extremely elated. There is nothing that needed to be said. Second brother stabbed elder brother to death. This is wonderful. It is the end of these 2 foes. And seems like father was so angered he might not make it. This throne is definitely mine. Time to have a great celebration. But the ones celebrating that day were not just the third prince. On that night, Li Yuran led the troops and forced his way into the imperial prison to rescue the second prince. The troops stormed their way back to the residence and celebrated without restraints. There was a hint of evilness behind the ridiculousness of this entire matter. On the same evening, all the subordinates under the second prince came out in full force, and with the aid of a group of strong, mysterious helpers, they wiped out all the forces under the first prince. This included several large families and over 10 officials. They killed until fresh blood ran like rivers. And on this same night, unfortunately, all the garrison military officers vanished mysteriously. The leaders of several barracks had also disappeared, resulting in the imperial bodyguards not having a commander to lead them. So it was unusually smooth and easy for the second prince to launch his relatively unbrilliant bloody scheme. A day later, in a tiny well in the imperial palace, they found over 10 bodies, the corpses of the commanders of the imperial bodyguards, filling up that small well till it was brimming with water. The great emperor, who had watched his own sons cruelly killing each other and stain the entire royal palace in blood, finally hardened his heart and announced to make the third prince, Yang Xie, the crown prince. He also issued an imperial order to gather all of Tian Xiang's forces to aid the emperor to annihilate the second prince. An intense battle unfolded instantly within the capital. And this battle had completely chilled the heart of the emperor. Several large families chose to not be involved. The Murong family had already resigned from their official positions, and those who insisted on not resigning were banished from the family. The entire family was getting ready to move away from the capital to return back to their hometown and enjoy the rest of their lives. Aid the emperor? That was what the court members should do. So what did it have to do with them? Poor and common people? The Song family shut their doors. Due to his grandson Li Yuran, Grand Preceptor Li chose to stand on the side of the second prince. The Dugu family, on the other hand, had their doors wide open. But no one came out of it. They were all there to watch the show. There was no way to not watch this show. All 9 high-ranking generals in the family were sick. They could only aid by watching. There was no need to even talk about the Jun family. Jun Tian had long resigned from his position, and the dispute of the Xiang Empire had absolutely nothing to do with him. And with regards to the Meng family that was always in sync with the first prince, they were the first ones to be completely annihilated and wiped out. It was said that not even a dog from the entire household had managed to escape. Only Tang Wanli was still loyal, gathering all of his troops. But the old man was intercepted on his way and sustained heavy injuries and still remained unconscious. He was rescued by someone sent by the Xiang god of wealth, Tang Yuan. Not a single one of the several big royal families that had supported the emperor could be of use. All the military troops had also vanished. Left without any choice, in a fit of anger, the emperor decided to lead the troops into battle personally. A fight to death with his own son. And thus, a peculiar and odd sight began to unravel in the capital. The second prince, who was originally the weakest, seemed to have expanded unprecedentedly in strength, and was capable of putting up a fight against the strongest fighting power of the Xiang royal family, the imperial troops. With the careful strategies of Li Yuran, he was even gaining an upper hand. When the battle had reached its middle game, the hungover third prince had finally woken up and brought his troops, joining forces with his own father to defeat his second brother. Only then did they manage to suppress the second prince, but they were still unable to invade the second prince's residence. The 3 parties entered a stalemate. The dark smoke billowed in the entire capital, as if it were the end of the world. And it was at this point that Jun Moxie finally returned to the Jun residence. Old Master Jun and Jun Wuyi stood at the top of the tower of their residence, gazing into the distance. Old Master Jun's brows were tightly knitted, seemingly troubled. Third Master Jun, on the other hand, looked like he was watching a show. The father and son had 2 different expressions on their faces. The capital has really been lively these couple of days. Jun Moxie chuckled, stepping into the tower. HPMH. Lively, isn't it? But this old man wouldn't believe it if you did not have a hand behind in all this excitement. Old Master Jun glared at his grandson harshly. Only you would be capable of coming up with such a vicious scheme like this. What has this got to do with me? I really haven't been in the capital these couple of days. Even if I were in the capital, I am not even chummy or close with any one of them. I'm genuinely maligned. Jun Moxie gave a most innocent look. Perhaps both father and son were sick of playing games with each other and wanted to have some fun and excitement personally. Fighting with each other? That'd make sense. Don't you agree with me, third uncle? There are all sorts of people in this world. For the sake of strengthening their power. For the sake of obtaining power. They are capable of anything. Jun Wuyi couldn't help but laugh. That's true. What could a father and son like them be incapable of doing? The supreme power of the world, the desire to rule the world, is enough to cover up all conscience. Jun Tian blew at his beard. Stop talking rubbish. This country is going to perish. Brothers destroying each other. Father and son killing each other. This is called a game? It is a game you played. Isn't it? Grandfather. Relax. The Xiang Empire will definitely not perish. My father protected this country back then. How could I, as his son, destroy all his hard work like that? It definitely will not perish. Jun Moxie chuckled and went behind old Master Jun solicitously. Diligently kneading and rubbing his shoulders, he said, but the culprits behind my father's death can only dream of sitting on the throne peacefully. Living free and unfettered is also wishful thinking. Grandfather, it is a rare opportunity to watch a great show like this. Let's just enjoy and admire it. Then you two twats can slowly admire it. This old man is old and tired. I shall go and sleep now. Don't find me if there is anything. If there is nothing, then don't even come and find me. Old Master Jun stomped off. You did this, didn't you? Jun Moxie turned around and faced his nephew. It cannot really be counted as my work. All I did was really gave a couple of reminders. I didn't do anything else. Jun Moxie cackled as he wriggled his brows. Third uncle, have you been enjoying yourself these couple of days? Third Master Jun's face turned red. He put on his firmest expression and said, What do you mean enjoying myself? That was uncalled for. Don't change the topic. We are talking about serious business here. I am speaking of serious business, this, that, you've done what you should have done already. Right? Jun Moxie sheepishly asked, hoping to ask for some teaching and advice. Do what? What nonsense are you spouting? Are you itching for a beating? Jun Moxie's face was as red as beetroot. Avoiding his nephew's odd look with a tinge of guilty conscience, he tried hard to maintain his position as an elder. He chided, Don't speak rubbish. If you continue to talk rotten, I will punish you. Third uncle. Jun Moxie sulked, and spoke in a sincere manner. It is not good to live together before marriage. There is no verification in identity and status. Even if you don't mind, does third aunt not mind? Even if third aunt doesn't mind, this manner of dealing with things has a great impact on us juniors. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Looks like my playfulness as a child is all because of your influence. Today I have finally learnt of the root of my illness. Jun Moxie fumed with anger as he glared at Jun Moxie. You scoundrel! You still dare to speak of such nonsense. What does your incompetence from young have to do with me? I have always been upright and unyielding. When was I ever like you? Unable to hold a proper posture and position even though you've grown into such a big man now. I always wanted to whip you every time I see you. So you've grown some abilities now. Ha! You think third uncle doesn't dare to teach you a lesson anymore? Ha! No matter how capable you are, aren't you still my nephew? Jun Moxie clicked his tongue and sighed. Sigh. The hypocrisy of the world. As expected, once the wife has entered the room, the matchmaker is tossed over the wall. One. Third uncle. To think that I put in so much effort for you and third aunt. But now, all is great. The wife has only entered the house. Not even the room yet. But I, this great matchmaker, is already thrown over the wall already. To think that you still wish to teach me a lesson, you used to be so affable and genial. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 793. Retreat? Or not? Jun Moxie's neck turned red, and his breath grew heavy as he gritted his teeth. Little rascal, you're really asking for a beating, aren't you? Jun Moxie laughed complacently. Third uncle, what's that third aunt of mine doing nowadays? She can't always be hanging around you all day long, right? A trace of warmth shone in Jun Moxie's eyes as he smiled. Where would she have the time for me? She's dedicated her entire heart to taking care of those kids, even inviting famed doctors from far and wide to look after them. She even told me that she wants to build a large camp and take in all the poor children in the world with nowhere to go and take care of them, whether they be the children of soldiers who died in battle or commoners. They would all be treated equally. Jun Moxie breathed a sigh of relief and nodded his head. Third aunt is such a nice person. At the same time, his eyes flashed and he said in a serious tone. However, third uncle, I'm afraid this matter can only proceed after some time. You should make the necessary preparations. Very shortly, we must prepare to move. We will be leaving Xiang City. Jun Wuyi's eyes widened with shock. Why? Leave Xiang City? Where will we move to? Is there such a need? There is absolutely such a need. We must move to Tian Forest as quickly as possible. Jun Moxie drew a deep breath and continued. I've come here today to discuss this matter. Jun Wuyi's expression grew heavy. Because of the 3 holy lands? Yes. It will be comparatively safer over there. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows and said. Earlier, the 3 holy lands lost 9 venerables and 600 peak-level experts at the snowy peaks. And this time at Xiang, 9 saints came out with only a single one returning. The enmity from this matter is too big. To an irreconcilable point. And right now, although I have the strength to protect myself, I do not have the power to protect the entire family. If the 3 holy lands come once again, I'm afraid things will not be as simple. Although matters were rather serious before, it had not reached a point beyond saving. But now that they'd taken such a huge loss, they will definitely not underestimate us again. At that time, I'm afraid one of us will die. The chances of our Jun family being wiped out is also incredibly high. Jun Moxie continued helplessly. So in order to prevent casualties on our side, we must run and hide immediately. We will retreat into Tian Forest. Truthfully, only that place will give me more assurance. If it's really as serious as you say, not only must we retreat, we must also bring the Donghua family, Duanmu family, Xikong family, and the Dongfang family as well. Jun Wuyi said with tightly knitted brows. Since the 3 holy lands will not spare our Jun family, the other families who are close to yours will also turn into targets for their vengeance. If anything happens to them, how will the 2 of us feel at peace? Jun Moxie shook his head and sighed longly. Third uncle, it's too late. Right now, we can only move the most important people into Tian first. As long as the few important people are gone, even with the 3 holy lands' arrogance, even if they're more unresigned, they wouldn't necessarily raise their swords against ordinary folks. In that case, I'll immediately look for Brother Duanmu, Brother Xikong, and the rest first to discuss further. Jun Wuyi said decisively. Moxie, you will be in charge of arranging things with the Xian beasts. This matter must not be delayed. Since we've decided to go, then we will do so swiftly. The faster the better. In case of any unexpected changes. Jun Moxie smiled. Third uncle, please be rest assured. I've already settled things with Big Bear and the other beast kings. We're only waiting for the discussions on your side. After that, we can move immediately. The priority is in the first batch. All the important people must be moved away. After that, we will set up our base in the Tian Forest as quickly as possible. That way, we have a much better chance of facing the 3 holy lands. At the very least, we will not be in danger of being annihilated at any time. Jun Moxie said energetically. He'd already thought of another thing as well. Although Mei Shui Yan could not come out temporarily, And she was also unwilling to appear in her non-human form. She would certainly still be very happy when she knew that she had returned to Tian Fa Forest. Jun Wu-yi nodded slowly. This matter cannot be delayed. I will go and make the arrangements immediately. As his words left his mouth, his body blurred and he disappeared. Third Master Jun was a very clever man. He could clearly sense that this was an extremely critical time. Perhaps at any time, the vengeance of their enemy would arrive. Since they'd already decided to retreat, they had to act decisively. They could not afford even the slightest delay. At this time, the only person atop the tall walls was Jun Moxie. As he looked at the roiling dust of the city, he felt an indescribable emptiness in his heart. Or rather, perplexion. These inexplicably subtle feelings were his innermost feelings, his emotions. Joking around with Jun Wu-yi had triggered his own heart. He was already 18 years old, and it was about time for him to face the matters of marriage and forming a family. But right now, there were some contradictions in his heart. As a man, it was only natural that some thoughts would form in his mind when he saw a beautiful girl. Jun Moxie was certainly not an exception. Moreover, he already had Guan Qinghan, who was already his woman, and debauchee, whom the elders of the two families had arranged for him to marry. Guan Qinghan was gentle and strong-willed, cold and honest, and as beautiful as a fairy. debauchee was lively and cute, stubborn and cheerful. Her appearance was also one among 10,000. But Jun Moxie realized to his surprise that in this period, he actually did not think of them at all. All his thoughts were placed on Mei Shuayan alone. Jun Moxie himself knew that this was undoubtedly unfair to Guan Qinghan and debauchee. Even when he was masquerading as a debauchee, debauchee had seen the good in him. She could be said to have done everything she could to gain his affection. Although some of her actions were too overboard and ridiculous, even resulting in serious consequences, it was undeniable that that little lass's heart was truly devoted to him. Jun Moxie could clearly see everything she had done and kept them in his heart. How could he remain unmoved against such dedicated love? Guan Qinghan's selfless sacrifice for the sake of the Jun family was also something that he could see very clearly. For the sake of the Jun family, she would rather throw away her own life. And not only once. In order to save his life last time, she hadn't even hesitated to sacrifice her chastity. How can Jun Moxie not be moved by such a girl? How could he not cherish her? Alas, life was sometimes contradictory like that. Although Jun Moxie clearly knew all this, and he had also decided to be with these two girls forever, he still felt a little guilty in his heart towards them. Whether it was Mei Shuayan, Guan Qinghan, or debauchee, a man could not be in love with two women at the same time. Because there was ultimately only one portion of true love to give. The moment one found their one true love, it would be for a lifetime, never to part forever. Jun Moxie was truly in love with Mei Shuayan. Towards Guan Qinghan, it was a sense of admiration and responsibility. Towards debauchee, it was a protectiveness, liking, and responsibility. He had feelings for all of them. Or perhaps, even the most common problem among men. Amorousness. It was an undeniable fact. If Guan Qinghan or debauchee left now, Jun Moxie would not be able to accept it. He would rage. And he would be filled with sorrow. But if Mei Shuayan disappeared, his heart would completely shatter. And he would completely turn into a maddened state. Men. Am I also a man who cannot detach myself from all these things? Jun Moxie smiled bitterly as he examined this abnormal state of mind. The more he thought, the more muddled his mind became. This was the first time that he felt that a man with a harem was actually an extremely exhausting thing. Not all of them were truly happy. Feck. Am I still a cold-blooded killer? Jun Moxie asked himself with a bitter smile. Would a killer, or a king of assassins, be like this? This question was seemingly impossible to answer. Men, like women, were contradictory creatures by nature. No matter how loyal a man was, he would still turn to take a second look if he saw a beautiful girl in the streets. An appreciation for beautiful things was something that everyone had. Since there were no results even if he pondered further, then he would just let nature take its course. Jun Moxie walked down the tower slowly, his heart in a mess. For the first time in his life, he did not dare confront his feelings. It was the first time he was so affected. By the time he reached the Great Hall, Jun Wuyi had already gathered everyone important, and they were in the middle of a discussion. Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun were free-spirited people who did not have fixed lodgings. To them, it didn't really matter where the Jun family was going to move to. The ones that truly exceeded Jun Moxie's expectations were unexpectedly the Dongfang family, Duanmu family, and Xikong family. Dongfang Wenqing had the strongest objection about the decision to move to Tian Fa Forest. Third brother, your suggestion is too ridiculous. Although the Jun family is now considered as a super family, the number of people in your family is actually very little. If you wish to move to the Tian Fa ferocious land, it wouldn't be too hard. But our Dongfang family has only just broken our vows with great difficulty, and we're making a bright comeback. What reason do we have to hide into Tian Fa forest like tortoises? Not to mention other things. That place is ultimately the territory of Tian Fa's myriad beasts. We can interact harmoniously with the beast kings. But if you want our Dongfang family to hide in Tian Fa ferocious land, it's absolutely impossible. Even if we took 10,000 steps back and talked, the Three Holy Lands has an irreconcilable grudge with only the Jun family. Our Dongfang family has never harmed their interests in any direct way before. No matter how narrow-minded Mo Wu Dao may be, he's still considered a peak expert of a generation. Surely he wouldn't direct his wrath towards a bunch of worldly families. For these reasons, our Dongfang family will not retreat. Dongfang Wendao and Dongfang Wenjian were of the same opinion as well. Even more surprising to Jun Moxie was that Xikong Yi and Wanmu Chao Fan also thought the same way. The Jun family is the main target, so it's completely reasonable to want to retreat. But there shouldn't be such a need for our two families. After all, the Three Holy Lands are well-reputed powers. If they really decided to bully us regular families out of spite, that would be too much of a stain on their reputation. They couldn't afford to bear such a shame. Thus, third brother, you can rest assured about the few of us. Still, we agree with Moxie's suggestion. If the Jun family doesn't retreat, it would definitely receive the terrible retribution of the Three Holy Lands. Everyone, the safety of your family should be held in your own hands. How can you bet it on the kindness of the Three Holy Lands? Such a decision is equivalent to placing the life and death of your entire families in other people's hands. This is the most unreliable choice. This junior hopes that everyone can reconsider. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows deeply and said as soon as he heard the results of this meeting. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 794. This enmity shall be resolved today. There's no need to discuss this matter any further. Dongfang Wenqing declared huffily. We cannot afford to lose the renowned reputation which had been built up so painstakingly. Even if we die, we still cannot afford to throw that reputation away. Unfailing as the sun that rises from the east, I am undefeatable. We are about to recreate the glory of our family. If we were to shrink back and hide away now, retreating under the wings of beasts for protection, what return to glory can the Dongfang family still talk about? Since the discussion had reached such a state, any more words would simply be useless. If the issue was forced further, all courtesy would be dropped. Left with no choice, Jun Moxie could only ask everyone to raise their guard and be careful. He gave them as many healing pills as he could and arranged many channels to transmit messages. The Eagle King's underlings were spread out to facilitate the communications between all the families. If there were any changes, it would be easier to provide each other support. The next day, Dongfang Wenqing, Duanmu Chao Fan, and the rest left Tian Xiang and hurriedly set off to return to their own territories. Old Master Jun also only received a faceful of dust when he went to look for Dugu Zongheng. The old Master Dugu was drinking when he received the news. After falling silent for a long time, he waved his hand and shook his head. You all leave first. We will not go. The Dugu family is not going anywhere. Jun Tian had interacted with this old man for his entire life, so how would he not understand the thoughts of the latter? He didn't try to persuade him any further. Sighing lightly, he stood up silently and left. Dugu Zongheng looked at his back view moodily. Just as Jun Tian was about to step out of the door, he called out in a deep tone. Tell your grandson to treat my granddaughter well. That's the precious treasure of our Dugu family. If he mistreats her, this old man will cut him into pieces. Jun Tian stood silently for a moment, before sighing and continuing on, only leaving a single line of words behind. I'll be leaving the people of Tian Xiang to you. Dugu Zongheng watched as he disappeared from view. Raising his head, he suddenly brought a large bowl of wine to his face and gulped it into his stomach, grunting heavily. Old Jun, you still understand me best after all. I, Dugu Zongheng, was never a person who was greedy for power. Those few lads in the family are also not the type who are good at playing with schemes. However, the two great armies of Tian Xiang have protected this land for 60 years. Tian Xiang country is not only made up of its emperor. There are still hundreds of millions of citizens. Your Jun family is definitely leaving, but if the Dugu family also followed, what would happen to them? How could this old man bear to watch as the commoners be plunged into misery and suffering? The 9 dragons of my Dugu family still need to uphold this country for the sake of the millions of commoners. It's fine if they feel grateful, and it doesn't matter if they're unappreciative. In any case, this is one of the few purposes of this old Dugu Zongheng's life. As for the royal family, when has this old man ever placed the glories of royalties in his eyes? After saying this, he drank another large gulp of wine. Then, he sprawled himself against the table, sweeping the wine bowl off and causing it to shatter loudly on the ground. Laying with his eyes closed, he mumbled incoherently. Heroes and heroines charging forward, in this turbulent times. How could the heroes of our Dugu family retreat? Only by charging. Charging forward, otherwise. The entire Tian Xiang country will be filled with suffering and distress, with fires raving through the lands. We cannot leave. Cannot leave. The entire Jun family was embroiled in the frenzy of last-minute preparations. Only old Master Jun stood alone atop the highest tower of the Jun family, gazing outward solemnly. Every tile and brick, each blade of grass and every tree of Tianxiang City, it seemed as if he would not get enough of them even if he looked all day long. This was the place that the Jun family and he had stood guard over for their entire lives. For the sake of this land, this old man donned shining spears and mounted armored horses for an entire lifetime, escaping from deadly situations hundreds of times. For this land, Wu Hui bounded himself to duty and honor without glancing back, campaigning through the battlefields. The relentless winds and rains in the mountains, the bitter cold of the deserts, the vast plains under the hoofs of the warhorses, the battle cries of bannermen, which man of the Jun family had not experienced them? Old Master Jun stood silently for a long time, and slowly, crystal-like tears welled up in his eyes. 2 lines of tears rolled off his eyes, staining his snow-white beard, finally dripping onto the ground, drop after drop. From his adolescence to his old age, how many brothers had turned into white bones in front of his eyes? How many good men were drenched in blood, laying down their lives under his lead? Even his own beloved son and grandsons had spilled all their hot blood on this land. The brilliant glint of war blades seemed to be flashing before his eyes, and the sorrowful cries of brave men rang in his ears. The look in the eyes of his brothers in the moment before death was engraved deeply in his heart to this day. And the agonized roars of battle echoed clearly in his mind. Big Brother Jun. Big Brother Jun. Jun Tian closed his eyes tightly, and his aged face twitched with pain. He lowered his head, and his shoulders trembled lightly as tears rolled down his cheeks. Begrudging. Unwilling. He truly loathed to part with all this. But today, he was finally about to leave. This place had clearly brought him endless sorrow and tears, as well as countless regrets. But why did his heart feel so much pain when it came to leaving? Heroes of 100 battles look lightly upon life and death. Valiant warriors never turn back in life. Long winds may fall on calvaries and glaciers, but how many times do our soul dream of the thick blood on our blades? Jun Tian choked as he recited the poem. This poem was something that he often sang loudly with his brothers, while sitting beside a fire and sharpening their blades after a bloody battle. Right now, how many people still remembered that poem? Tears flowed swiftly down his cheeks, but Jun Tian still gritted his teeth and mumbled in a cracked voice. Brothers, I am really leaving now. I'm leaving this place where all your heroic souls lie. If you guys miss me, please visit me in my dreams. This tough old man had not cried when his son died. He didn't cry when his grandsons died. But today, he was sobbing inconsolably with emotion. Because he was about to leave this land that he loved so deeply, this land that he'd poured his blood, sweat and tears. Although this land had let him down, although the emperor of the land had betrayed him, robbing him of his son and scheming against his grandsons, this was still a land that Jun Tian won with hundreds of battles. It was the painstaking efforts of the entire Jun family over the years that secured it. Humans were not grass or trees. How could they be without emotion? But today, he could not remain. He had to go. Because if he insisted on staying, Jun Wuyi and Jun Moxie would definitely not go as well. Then, the Jun family would truly be finished. His son and grandsons had already sacrificed their lives for this land. Should his last remaining son and grandson also be buried here? No. Absolutely not. For this reason, he had to go. Even if he was so reluctant. Right now, he needed to take up responsibility for his family. Jun Moxie walked alone, dressed in a flowing black robe. He stepped lightly upon the wide street, moving steadily towards the unceasing noise of battle and the cries of murder. His pace was leisure and light, But the gap in between each step was amazingly consistent. Every step he took was very intentional and very solemn. Because all of the enmity and grievances laid at the end of this road. The general in white Jun Xie's debt of blood, the divine iron-blooded war god Jun Meng's death, and the life of his two elder brothers Wu Yu and Wu Meng, the 10 years of heartbreak and deep sleep his mother suffered. All this debt would be demanded back from that chief criminal today. The price for everything. Since the Jun family had already decided to leave, Jun Moxie would no longer continue dragging out a long outcome that might result in unpredictable hitches. No matter what, all the enmity and hatred would be resolved today. The second prince was indeed very cooperative. And Li Yuran was also sufficiently quick, actually managing to so smoothly finish off one prince in such a short time and also create such a huge drama. In that case, to arrive early was not so good as to arrive at the most opportune moment. Since things were already like this, he might as well make use of this auspicious day to conclude all the memories and hatreds of the past together in one stroke. Kindness and enmity. Everything will end today. By the hands of I, the only descendant of the Jun family. From now on, the Jun family will no longer have any regrets. Forever. In the main streets of Tian Xiang, countless commoners' residences had been destroyed, and the previously prosperous and bustling street as well as the residential areas had been turned into a slaughtering ground for the two sides. This place that wasn't actually very spacious was filled with the savage cries of 40,000 people. Blood flew everywhere, and bodies littered the ground. People constantly fell to the ground from injury, dead before they could even reach the ground. A short moment ago, they were shouting and fighting fiercely, and the next moment, they had already turned into cold corpses. Soldiers constantly rushed forward, dragging their injured out by force. As for the people at the heart of the battle, they could only blame their own luck. That was not a place that people could easily enter and retreat from. On the side of the king, Tian Xiang's emperor was clad in a full set of golden armor, and seated atop a handsome, snow-white warhorse. He held a gleaming sword in his hand, and led his army personally, declaring that he would kill his own son. The third prince, Yang Zhe, rode behind him, and his face was filled with excitement and enthusiasm, seemingly valiant and unafraid of death. Only, he had 40 to 50 beefy soldiers surrounding him tightly, all carrying heavy shields to protect him. From the looks of it, this third prince was still extremely afraid of death. Standing opposite them, far away, the second prince surveyed the battle with his eyes red and impassioned. He rode atop a fiery red steed which trotted round and round on the spot, like a donkey pushing a millstone. Spittle flew from his mouth as he shouted savagely. Kill! Kill them for this king! Kill those two sons of beaches! This king will surely reward each person heavily. When this king comes into power, all of you will be loyal officials who founded the country. Glory and fortune, high positions and recognition are all within reach. We shall claim victory in one battle, and win honor and distinction that lasts 10,000 generations. Atop the highest wall of the second prince's manor, there was a large, round-backed wooden armchair suspended by two thick ropes tied to the trunks of two large trees. The chair was more than 10 feet above ground. And Li Yuran, the first young master Li, sat lazily atop it. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and he held a feather fan, talking freely with a relaxed face. He truly somewhat resembled Eastern Wu's Zhou Yu of the Three Kingdoms one as he sat there smiling lightly, watching the dust and smoke of the city. Li Yuran observed the battle situation keenly, with a calm expression. The feathered fan in his left hand moved slightly, and a soldier beside him immediately raised a little flag. On the side of the second prince, a horn rang out, and the battle formation instantly changed. After a moment, he motioned to the soldier again, and the battle formation changed again. Jun Moxie watched the situation with a light smile. He could see that the second prince's forces were actually the inferior side, but under Li Yuran's command, the battle formation changed continuously, turning into a gigantic meat grinder. Both sides suffered casualties, but the emperor's forces took significantly heavier losses. Fighting an outnumbered battle, vying against the strong with the strength of the weak, it wasn't impossible for the battle situation to turn around. Jun Moxie could even confirm that such a strange situation was definitely created on purpose by Li Yuran. Otherwise, given his wits, it was next to impossible that he would allow his army to fall into such a deadly brawl. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 795. Close kin slaughtering each other. More importantly, no one had seen anyone from the Li family's side join the war from start to end. One must know that Grand Preceptor Li had accumulated a great amount of strength over the years. Although the number of experts in his forces may not be very high, in terms of an ordinary army, they could definitely be considered the elites among the elites. If they joined the battle, it would instantly be a deciding factor. Even if they didn't win straight out, the second prince's forces would not be drawn into such a bitter fight where they had to trade lives with their enemies, and even tether along the edge of being completely wiped out. The emperor also definitely had his own trump cards, but Li Yuran's strategy in controlling this war was to maximize the chaos in the city as much as possible. The bigger, the better. His heart was as steady as a mountain. After all, Jun Moxie would turn up in the end to clean up the scene. He would take the battle before his eyes as just some entertainment. No matter how many people died, it wouldn't affect young Master Li's heart at all. It was best if everyone died. This Li Yuran is really a rare talent. Jun Moxie sighed and muttered. He's such a clever man. Why must he be a crook? He raised his head and looked in the direction of the prince equivalent, wondering about the little rascal Yang Mo and thinking to himself, should I keep this Li Yuran? Is it a good thing, or a bad thing to keep him alive? To kill such a talent, he truly felt it to be somewhat of a pity. But if he kept him alive, apart from himself, who in this world could keep Li Yuran's heaven-shocking talent and scheming mind in check? Yang Mo, does he have that ability? Even though he was facing a scene where thousands of soldiers and horses were smashing against each other, Jun Moxie only stood quietly to ponder about his own thoughts. It was as if the slaughter fest in front of his eyes was not worth a single glance. He did not put it to his heart at all. The dense killing intent and cries of war formed into a wave, accompanying the spring breeze as it washed over his head. His hair floated lightly, exposing his clear forehead and those slightly furrowed brows. The Jun Moxie in that moment seemed to have a deeper and more melancholic feel about him. As if he were a simple youth, not familiar with the ways of the world, feeling an unknown, inexplicable sorrow for the first time in his life as he faced the spring flowers and autumn moons and the relentless river of time and the ages. Long live! Long live! At this time, a chorus of excited roars rang out in the battlefield like a tsunami. Jun Moxie raised his head and looked up from his daze only to see that the emperor had grown restless after failing to break the ranks of his opponent after so long. Raising his sword, he'd charged into battle personally, causing the royal guards behind him to jump up in fear and hurriedly follow after him. With the emperor stepping onto the battlefield personally, and even leading the troops himself, The boost in morale to the troops was undoubtedly huge. The royal army was practically shouting itself hoarse, and the soldiers' eyes were red as they rushed over, as if they didn't want their lives anymore. As the saying went, a single general risking his life makes 10,000 soldiers invincible. Right now, it was not just a mere general risking his life. In just a short moment, the pressure on the side of the second prince multiplied greatly. Even with superior formations, Li Yuran's brilliant strategies were not sufficient to stem this tide. The third prince, who was heavily protected by his guards, suddenly saw that their side was in an absolute advantageous position. And the second prince's forces were being beaten back repeatedly. Recognizing his opportunity, he roared like a tiger. "Bring the drums. This prince will personally drum up some support for Royal Father. Royal Father is wise and brilliant. May he vanquish this evil traitor Yang Dan in one swift stroke." Very quickly, a soldier carried a huge drum over. The third prince threw his cloak behind him and walked forward suavely, grabbing the drumsticks. Then, he began beating upon it energetically with the momentum of fierce winds and relentless rains. It was actually very rhythmic. And from the looks of it, the rumors that this prince was spending his free time beating the drums while watching his wives and concubines play soccer naked was actually not that far-fetched. Judging from the skills he was displaying today, it seemed like he had practiced for a long time. The drumbeats fell like rain, dense and rapid. All the soldiers were all shouting at the top of their lungs. "Your Majesty is mighty. His Highness the Crown Prince is awe-inspiring. We will definitely be victorious." Their voices shook the earth and trembled the heavens, as if they'd already won. The reason this crown prince took up the drums to boost the morale of the army was because the emperor himself had stepped onto the battlefield. As the crown prince, it would be too inappropriate if he didn't step up himself. But for him to enter the battle personally, this awe-inspiring crown prince was simply too afraid of death. Thus, he came up with this idea. Beating the drums was something that could directly increase the morale of the army, but it was actually done at the back of the army. It was even extremely far back, to the point where it was nearly at the most rear. Even the straightest arrow would not reach him. One had to admit that this crown prince was also quite talented in his own way. At least, he was quite quick-witted in critical moments. The battle at the front lines was growing more and more intense. The battle drums on both sides resounded like thunder, and war banners flew high in the sky among the huge crowd of people. Just at this time, a completely unexpected situation that no one would have thought of appeared. The third Prince Yang Xie, or rather, the current crown prince, suddenly threw his drumsticks aside and stood up passionately. Raising his chicken-like neck, he roared to the heavens. Suddenly, he took a large step and strode out, walking towards his warhorse with a never-before-seen pride and determination. His steps were firm and forceful, and his back was straight. His short stubby legs crossed in front of him as he walked, like a cat walking on a straight line, showing the demeanor of a crown prince of a country. Everyone who saw this could not help but to praise in their hearts, This is our crown prince. See how heroic he is. How brave. And unafraid of death. How many geniuses, What is going on?" The crown prince leapt onto his horse with a single jump, clasped his legs around the horse, and under the disbelieving eyes of the crowd, he pulled out the riding crop and whipped it sharply across the horse's rear end. Then he raised his voice and roared loudly. His usual duck-like voice sounded extraordinarily heroic this time. "This crown prince is also going. A man should live and die for their country. Why should they give their lives pointlessly on the battlefield? Royal Father, your little Daiki is here. To think that he actually came up with a poem on the spot. And it was actually such a memorable one. One iconic enough to be passed down for thousands of years. This poem was filled with both literacy fluency and martial inspiration. Truly a perfect combination of literacy grace and martial virtues. As expected of the Crown Prince everyone was filled of praises. Until they heard the last sentence. The entire crowd was stunned in an instant. Their mouths hung wide open, unable to be closed. And shock was written over the faces of every single person. Royal Father. Your little Daiki is here. What kind of words were those? Could it be that your royal father usually didn't bring his little thing out? And you needed to go and deliver it to him? If not, where did you three siblings come out from? All self-proclaimed? That would be too outrageous, right? Unless this was a loving nickname that the father and son used in private? In that moment, everyone was stunned speechless as they looked at each other. Such a strange scene was naturally directed by young Master Jun. Actually, this term, Little Daiki, also had some origins to it. The third prince was called Xiang Xie, and the second part of his name, Xie, was a word made up with two G written side by side. The young Master Jun, who wasn't as well versed in literature, didn't really understand the word, and having never seen the need to learn such a word, he always separated the name and called the third prince as Yang Ji. Thus in that moment, he simply used his favorite and most convenient term, which was the, your little Daiki is here. The uncultured young Master Jun actually ended up causing the newly appointed crown prince to become such a huge joke right in front of the battlefield. Regarding this, young Master Jun indeed felt somewhat apologetic. He'd clearly intended for the crown prince to yell out, GG. As for what others interpreted it as, he could only say that these people's minds were too dirty. In any case, it was a person who was going to die soon anyway, just call him whatever you like. While this took a long time to describe, only an instant had passed in reality. Just as everyone was still in a state of shock, the crown prince had charged out atop his warhorse, killing all the way towards his royal father while crying out, Royal Father. Your little GG is here. In that moment, both sides' soldiers only looked on with shock. A few people who were in the midst of fighting even forgot to swing their swords as they looked at the wildly charging crown prince with disbelief. The second prince awoke first from the state of shock, and began laughing madly, one by one. Everyone clutched their stomachs and laughed until tears rolled down their cheeks. Your Majesty, so it turns out that you were afraid for your little thing and decided to keep it away first before the battle. Your Majesty is truly far-sighted. This official has complete admiration for you. Tian Xiang is truly blessed to have such a prudent emperor. There is nothing that the country cannot achieve like this. All of us here are men. We can understand why you did that. Haha. The entire battlefield was filled with the voices of mocking laughter. There actually weren't any sides anymore. The emperor was so angry that his face turned green, and even his chest grew tight, as if he was going to have a heart attack. But at this juncture, who could he turn his wrath to? The enemy? Who would bother with him? His own people? Wouldn't that simply douse the morale in the hearts of his own soldiers? Left with no other alternatives, he raised his finger shakily and pointed it at his son. Idiot! What nonsense are you spouting? The crown prince Xiang Xie had rushed over excitedly, only to be met with a face full of steaming fart. In that moment, his face turned aggrieved as he cried out, Royal Father! It's me, your little GG. I've come to help you. Why are you scolding me? I'm your little Daiki. Don't you want me anymore? Jun Moxie himself was still hidden nearby, but he was laughing so hard that his stomach hurt. Still, it was enough for the show to reach up to this point. It can be closed now. Pointing his finger at the crown prince's head, Xiang just suddenly hollered with rage. Yang bastard. Roll over here for this daddy to die. This sentence was even more amazing, directly turning himself into his second elder brother's daddy. The emperor was so angered that he nearly fell off his horse. But before he had the time to lecture him, Xiang Xie opened his mouth and began cursing fluidly, whipping his horse and charging into no man's land. His warhorse was like a soaring dragon, leaping into the air and diving into the enemy's ranks, stabbing towards the second prince. His enemies parted to the two sides as he approached, like water before a ship, clearing him a wide berth forward. It was actually the dazzling scene of a single hero charging into the enemy's ranks to take the head of the opposing general. Wow! His Highness the Crown Prince is amazing. The ass-kissers on their side had already begun to cheer with excitement. Before their voices had faded, the Crown Prince Xiang Xie had already charged all the way to the second prince's side. His warhorse neighed and snorted fiercely, lifting up both front hooves like a scene out of a legendary story. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 796. Tragedy of the Human World. Everyone gasped with amazement. The Crown Prince's move was simply too brilliant. Once the sword in his hand slashed down, the traitor before him would be directly vanquished. That was a huge contribution. If such a brave Crown Prince took his place as emperor, he would certainly be a very wise king. What kind of bravery did one need to do such a heroic act? The heavens are favoring our Tian Xiang. That is why they're blessing us with a brave ruler. The Crown Prince would definitely lead Tian Xiang to greater heights. Even uniting the continent and vanquishing the other kingdoms would not be impossible matters. In an instant, everyone on the emperor's side grew excited. Some had even readied themselves, taking in a deep breath so that the moment the sword slashed down, they could roar their victory. The second prince was clearly a piece of meat on the chopping board with no place to hide. Even the emperor, who was in the midst of battle, turned his head over with a look of joy as well as an indetectable trace of sorrow in his eyes. Just at this time, another anomaly appeared. The courageous and awe-inspiring Crown Prince suddenly stopped his actions and looked around in a panicked manner as if he had just been awoken from a dream. He started bawling with tears and snot ran down his face. Mother. Father. How did I get here? Woo-woo. Don't kill me, second brother. My dear second brother. Please. I beg you. I'm willing to be a slave or a dog for you. Just don't kill me. With a pu sound, a yellowish-white substance burst out of the Crown Prince's pants, flowing down his legs. The battlefield was suddenly filled with a horrible stink. He had actually been so scared that he literally shut and pissed himself. Indeed, flying waters descending 3,000 feet. Till I think the yellow river has tumbled from the 9th height of heaven. The second prince saw his third brother charging towards him, with no one blocking him at all. He was about to dodge to the side, but he found himself suddenly unable to move. His heart filled with despair, and he prepared himself to die. His third brother had rode all the way into his forces like a powerful spear through a forest of bamboo, arriving right before him. The second prince only had enough time to form the words, "I'm dead," in his heart. He knew that he would not be able to escape death this time. Helpless. Why? He closed his eyes tightly. But despite waiting for a long time, the blade did not fall. Instead, he heard the pleading cries of the Crown Prince. And the one he was pleading to seemed to be himself. How was this possible? Shouldn't he be the one begging his younger brother for mercy? Following that, he heard a strange sound. Like a person having a terrible stomachache after eating bad croton seeds, and a foul smell quickly rose into his nose. The second prince opened his eyes as if he had awoken from a dream. The first thing he saw was the crown prince, quivering like a pitiful worm and begging him with a face full of despair. Just what was going on? The second prince blinked his eyes somewhat disbelievingly as he looked at the crown prince. The latter had already tumbled down from his horse and was crawling upon the ground. Foul yellow liquid was flowing from his pant legs, forming a trail behind him. He raised his head and looked at him. Second brother, woo-woo, my dearest second brother. You mustn't kill me. As long as you let me go, I will definitely not fight with you for the throne. I'm even willing to be your oxen or your horse. Second brother. Your Highness. Your Highness. Spare me. Feck you. The second prince finally recovered from his shock. Thinking back to how he had been scared stiff by this little bastard a moment ago, his face grew hot and anger surged through his heart. Roaring angrily, he pulled out his sword, leapt off his horse, and drove his sword towards the crown prince's neck without any hesitation. Aren't you the newly appointed crown prince? Aren't you very impressive? Weren't you behaving very suavely just now? Come then. What's wrong? Why aren't you being fierce now? As he shouted, he plunged the sword swiftly into his own brother's heart, pulling it out, stabbing it in again. He repeated this action several dozen times until finally the crown prince's body resembled a beehive. His limbs had also been chopped apart and turned into indistinguishable pieces of meat. The second prince roared savagely, kicking the incomplete body into the air as he laughed proudly. You little bastard. You think you can fight me for the throne? Motherfucking idiot. See if this daddy wouldn't toy you to death. The second prince, who had always been physically weak, was panting heavily. However, his hands and feet still did not stop. Whether it was the enemy or his own forces, both sides stopped fighting in that instant as they looked dumbly at this scene. Every single person was wearing the same expression. Disbelief. It was utterly illogical. Everyone's eyes were opened wide with shock. Something like this actually happened in this world? Dear gods, save me. I think there's something wrong with my eyes. Something like this that not even the gods could think of. How could it happen in front of my eyes? Just what was going on? We aren't dreaming, right? How did this world become so crazy? The Tian Xiang emperor, who'd also just recovered from his shock, began to gasp and choke for breath. His eyes were opened wide, and his mouth hung all the way to the ground with disbelief. All the sounds around him seemed to have disappeared, as if he were watching a soundless show. His youngest son, the only remaining son of imperial bloodline worthy enough to inherit his throne, had been killed so horribly in the hands of his traitor second son. On top of that, he had died without a full corpse, almost as if it were death by 1,000 cuts. His shoulders trembled heavily, and he finally awakened to the reality as he clutched his chest. At this moment, he felt as if his heart would tear apart from the pain as he cried out in a heart-wrenching voice. Jur. My dear son. He felt his vision blur, and as the sun shone into his eyes, his head swayed and a large mouthful of blood burst out of his mouth. His face instantly paled to a faint yellowish color, and he directly fell off his horse. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! The guards around him rushed over with shock, catching a hold of him. At this time, the pitiful emperor had finally fainted. Out of his 3 sons, the eldest had been killed right in front of him only a few days ago, pierced through the heart by his second son. And now, The youngest son had also been killed in the hands of his own elder brother, torn into shreds in a horrifying manner. The tragedy of family tearing family apart. In the short span of 3 days. It had happened twice in succession. Although Yang Huaiyu had always been a steady and quick-witted person with extremely shrewdness, at the end of the day, he was still just a human. This kind of kinship, where blood was thicker than water, was still very important even in the emotionless palace. He was ultimately still a father. Right now, he was a father at the end of his road, a ruler on his last legs, a king deserted by friends, family, and allies. A blow like this was difficult to bear no matter who it was. The camo fell into complete chaos. The powerful demeanor of the army disappeared in an instant. On the other side, the second prince's eyes lit up with joy as he laughed maniacally. That undying old Kaji is finally unable to hold on. Everyone, charge! Whoever manages to deliver that old fart's head to this emperor will be granted a noble title of first-rank duke, as well as a large piece of land. The title and land can be inherited by your descendants in the future, and a death exemption medallion will be awarded to the family as well. At this point, the second prince had already begun to refer to himself as this emperor. But the moment this command was given, it was as if a bucket of oil had been poured onto a raging fire. Who among those that joined the army did not wish to obtain official positions, wealth, and glory? Who didn't wish to marry wives and have children, building a family that would last for generations? Furthermore, the second prince was promising a first-rank duke along with land. This alone was enough to rouse the hot blood of all the soldiers, not to mention the heaven-shocking words that followed. Hereditary title and land. Death exemption medallion for the family. Everyone went completely crazy. Even the soldiers on the emperor's side revealed looks of greed as they contemplated whether they should take the opportunity to cut down this extremely valuable head and deliver it to the second prince. After all, a chance like this would only appear once in a lifetime. If they didn't take the head, someone else would do it. As opposed to letting others benefit, they might as well take the benefit themselves. The moment this idea sprang up, it spread like wildfire through the battlefield, completely uncurbed. Quite a number of people turned around with bestial looks in their eyes. Then, like a bunch of mad dogs, they charged towards their own king. This emperor is not dead yet. Who dares to behave rashly? As long as this emperor is around, who in Tian Xiang dares to revolt? A loud roar suddenly rang out. The emperor had actually woken up again at an unknown time. His eyes blazed like electricity and blood still stained the corners of his mouth. He climbed back onto his horse and sat with his back straight. He looked extremely fierce and strong, not inferior to how he was in his prime. Under his sharp gaze, the surrounding soldiers actually did not dare meet his eyes. All of them took a few steps backwards, as the weapons in their hands lowered slightly. Even the second prince's face paled as the sword in his hand fell to the ground with a loud clang. His arms trembled lightly, and he actually avoided his father's eyes as they swept across his face. His legs turned soft, and he took 3 full steps backwards. Yang Dan. You want to kill this emperor? Yang Huaiyu stepped off his horse and spread out his arms as he stared fiercely at his son. You killed your eldest brother. And you've killed your third brother today. The 2 of them are your blood kin. The 3 of you were all born from the same mother. If they are bastards, what are you? And now, you even wish to kill me? You want to kill your own father? If I'm an old bastard, an old fart, then what are you? Answer this emperor. With each question he asked, he took 1 step forward. In his panic, the second prince backed up by a step as well. By the time he was finished, the emperor had moved 5 steps closer to him. The second prince's mouth opened and closed mutely, and his entire body trembled lightly. His eyes swiveled aimlessly, and his face was filled with anxiousness. The savagery that he displayed only a moment ago had completely disappeared. This person was his own royal father. Although he could murder his own brothers in a ruthless manner against his own father, he ultimately could not do it. He did not dare to. Why? Yang Huayu. Your Majesty the Emperor. What's wrong? Yang Dan cannot kill you. Why can't he kill you? Do you have one more head than him? Or do you have an additional life? A clear voice sounded out in the air. The voice was gentle, not too light and not too heavy. It caused those who listened to it to feel a refreshing sensation, even somewhat dissipating the dense bloodlust of the battlefield. Jun Moxie. He'd finally appeared at this crucial moment. He had personally directed this show, and now that it had approached the finale, if he still didn't come out now, when would he show himself? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 797. Enmity and Hatred Resolved. Following the sound of a voice, everyone looked up. Far away, a youth in black walked slowly over with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was wreathed in a warm smile, and his expression was leisurely and casual, as though he was walking through his own garden. The thousands of people on the battlefield parted like the Red Sea, forming a passage for him through the carnage. It was as if an immortal had come to visit from the heavens. The ground was filled with thick, sticky fresh blood that covered one's soles completely. However, the powdered soles of the youth's shoes were not stained at all. He walked over casually, neither fast nor slow. Looking at the sword-wielding soldiers around him and at the river of blood under his feet, he raised his voice and lamented. Since ancient times, the path of kings is an emotionless one. So what if it's kin murdering their own blood? While gazing upon fortresses and mountains picturesque as a painting, their feet are filled with white bones. As he spoke, he had already walked and reached less than 10 zhang away from Tian Xiang's Yang Huayu. His black pupils carried an evil gleam as he tilted his head and looked at this emperor at the end of his path. Smiling lightly, he said, Your Majesty is truly in a good mood. To think that you're capable of lecturing your failure of a son in such a righteous manner right in the midst of a raging battle where blood and tears rain through the sky. What a loving father. How touching and admirable. He shook his head lightly as a lonely expression came over his face. Sighing heavily, he continued. It's a pity. I cannot even see my father anymore, or hear him lecture me. As a son, how can my heart not ache? The tree craves stillness, but the wind will not abate. The son wants to serve his parents in their old age, but they are no more. Your Majesty, this feeling is truly hard to describe with words. Tell me, isn't it so? You've lost 2 sons in quick succession, and the last one is attempting to kill you and wrest the throne away. Your Majesty can probably clearly understand the pains of this commoner. The emperor's eyes flashed with pain, as well as a deeply hidden fear. Furrowing his eyebrows tightly, he snorted. Jun Moxie. This matter is ultimately an internal problem of my imperial family. What are you here for? Who are you representing today? Unless your Jun family hasn't made enough trouble yet? Jun Moxie chuckled lightly. Your Majesty jokes. How could that be? Since when has our Jun family created any troubles? Ever since that incident at Tian Lin 10 years ago, our Jun Moxie no longer dares to create any trouble. He rolled his eyes and suddenly, a sharp gleam shot out from his pupils. His tone turned from gentle to exceptionally dominating and pressuring. Your Majesty, do you perhaps still remember Jun Wuhui of that year? The Tian Xiang Emperor's face twitched, and his expression grew dark. Do not speak falsehoods in the face of a sincere man. What do you want to say? Go ahead and say it directly. The moment Jun Moxie appeared, the kingly pressure that the emperor had built up with great difficulty actually disappeared in an instant. Facing Jun Moxie, he even seemed a little frightened and guilty. Jun Moxie smiled lightly, completely unfazed. Your Majesty, why are you losing your temper already? That imposing demeanor of yours nearly scared this commoner to death. Your Majesty asked what this commoner was trying to say. It's actually really nothing much. This one only wishes to ask Your Majesty, how does it feel like to watch your eldest son get killed under your own eyes inside the sparkly palace with a blade through the heart? At the place where your authority is the highest? He continued smiling warmly, but his eyes gleamed like a pair of swords. Anyways, the deceased has already departed. The dead is dead, and if Your Majesty does not wish to talk about it, so be it. But the murderer of your first son is your own second son. He became a traitor because he killed his own royal kin. What are your thoughts on that? And today, your third son was also chopped into minced meat by the same culprit. I'm sure the feeling of watching this must be very enjoyable. It's probably something that none of US outsiders can comprehend. As for right now, the last surviving son is raising his sword against his own father, murdering his father and his sovereign, accomplishing his own ambition. Does your heart hurt? But this kind of feeling should be quite unforgettable, right? Or maybe, Your Majesty can look forward to it a little. The kingdom that you've reigned over is finally about to be like a chrysanthemum on the morrow, withering to a thing of the past. You yourself will be forsaken by friends and allies, rebelled against by the masses, turning into an isolated creature. Does it bring you a bit more comprehensions on life? The emperor suddenly trembled with rage as he stared at Jun Moxie with wide, hate-filled eyes. Jun Moxie. Could it be that all this was because of you schemed behind my back? How vicious. Oh, I wouldn't dare to claim that honor. Compared to Your Majesty, I'm at most only considered a small sorcerer in the presence of a great one. This series of events is simply nothing more than people being driven crazy by power. I only played a tiny part in this whole thing. Truly. This commoner would never dare to deceive Your Majesty the Emperor. Jun Moxie smiled lightly, as if he were talking about an extremely insignificant matter. Shaking his head, he looked over with a ridiculing look. Do you feel like the matters of the world are somewhat inconstant? What was once the sea has now changed into mulberry fields. Do you feel any lamentation about the evanescence of worldly affairs, and how time brings great changes to the world? Ha ha ha. Jun Moxie, you've gone too far. The emperor clenched his teeth and roared. Both his eyes had already turned completely blood red. Is it too much? I don't think so. Your Majesty, when you directed the Blood Sword Hall to collaborate with the Blizzard Silver City Xiao family back then to harm my father and my second uncle, did you feel that it was too much? Surely not. Jun Moxie laughed coldly and smiled. When my two brothers died horrible deaths because of your schemes, did you feel that it might have been too much? No, right? How can you pluck out the weeds without getting rid of the roots? All these years, the Jun family was beaten to a point where we couldn't even catch a breath. But did you think that you went too far? The life of the emperor is greater than the heavens, while the subjects are less than ants. As long as any ant grew too big and posed any possibility of being a threat to your throne, even if it was just a mere possibility, they had to be removed at all costs. Our Jun family should in fact still thank your majesty for being merciful and not wiping us out completely. Jun Moxie raised his head and laughed aloud, his ice-cold eyes staring straight at the emperor. Cause and effect. The circle of karma. How is it, now that the same thing has happened to your majesty? Do you feel like it's too overboard? Huh. How funny. Is it really too overboard? This lowly commoner does not think so. From what this commoner has seen, this is actually far from being enough. How many people have you lost so far? How many brave heroes have lost their lives from your lowly schemes? Countless valiant men who fought and bled for their Tian Xiang kingdom survived the blades of their enemies, only to be killed by the ruler they had declared their loyalty to. Do they think that it's too overboard? Jun Moxie walked forward step by step, his aura abnormally heavy. The air itself seemed to have stopped flowing, and everyone felt an extremely suffocative pressure. You thought all this was too excessive? The real dish is still following. Yang Huayu. Today, you will definitely taste it. Jun Moxie's handsome face suddenly turned incomparably sinister as he raised his voice. Yang Dan. What are you waiting for? Kill this old bastard before you, and you'll be able to ascend to the throne of the emperor. As long as you finish this old Kaji, the throne will be yours. I promise it. The second Prince Yang Dan raised his head as though he had been awoken by this shout. He turned his head to look at his royal father as greed and ambition filled his eyes. A dark smile spread across his face as he stuck his tongue out and lightly licking his lips. His eyes grew redder and with a sudden roar, he shouted, "Many thanks to third young Master Jun for your good graces. Royal father, please do not blame this son for being unfilial. It was actually you who pushed me too far. Since you're already at the end of the road, just take it as a fulfilling of your son's wishes and a favor to me." Bending his waist, he picked up the sword that fell on the ground and took 2 large steps forward. His face was filled with conflict and hesitation. Their father and son relationship over all these years and the immense ambition in his heart were undergoing a huge internal struggle at this moment, causing his face to be lined with sweat. But in the end, it was still his crazy desire for power that came out on top. The temptation that came from being the ruler of all under the heavens, his fame spreading past the 4 seas, and being feared by all his subjects was simply too great. Yang Dan roared loudly, raised his treasured sword, and closed his eyes as he slashed down madly. Pooh! A spurt of fresh blood splattered onto the second prince's face. He opened his eyes again, seeing his royal father look at him with a heartbroken, despairing expression. His sword was lodged deeply in his royal father's shoulder. In that instant, Yang Dan's entire body trembled. No matter how he thought of his ending, the emperor would never have imagined that he would be witnessing his 3 sons slaughtering each other, and then himself being killed by the only remaining son. In that moment, the pain in his heart had reached an extreme level. When he looked at the sword slashing down towards him, he actually did not have any thoughts of dodging at all. He simply looked at that conflicted face before him, his eyes filled with complete and utter hopelessness. This is my son, my own flesh and blood. And for the sake of power, for the sake of the throne, he wants to kill me. He's murdering his own father. Fresh blood spurted out. The second prince increased his strength, forcibly pulling the sword out again. His entire body trembled with shock, and suddenly, a crazed expression came over his face as he roared madly. You old undying thing. Why aren't you dead yet? Why won't you die? Hurry up and die for me. Go to hell. Ah! Like a madman, he shouted in an intoxicated manner as he raised the sword and slashed down again. Repeatedly roaring. Repeatedly hacking. His face was filled with madness and fanaticism. Blood flowed unceasingly off his face, and bits of flesh could be found on his clothes. However, he did not seem to care. In that moment, he only had the single desire to cut down this person before him, the final obstacle that blocked his ascension to the throne. The emperor's current appearance was too wretched to look at. He had already ceased breathing a long time ago, save for that pair of empty eyes that stared listlessly and painfully at the entire scene. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 798. Kill him? Or keep him? It was after a long while before the second prince's hands finally came to a halt as he panted heavily over the mangled corpse of Yang Huayu. Catching his breath, he tossed the blood-stained sword fall onto the ground with a clang. The entire place was silent. Everyone looked in disbelief and shock at this prince maniacally chopped his own father up. The second prince's body suddenly jerked, his pupils slowly becoming focused. He suddenly spread his arms out and hollered crazily. Ha 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 ha. He's dead. This old thing is finally dead. Did you all see it? Did you guys see it? From today onwards, I am the emperor. I am the emperor. I am finally the emperor, ha 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 ha. This crazy, hysterical laughter echoed around. That's right. You are the emperor now. I deliver what I promise. Come, let me bring you to sit upon that chair that you have dreamed of for a long time. Jun Moxie looked at him sarcastically. Ah. Yes. Good good good. Ha ha ha. It is right here. The second prince laughed maniacally, suddenly running off towards the emperor's carriage. There was a dragon chair inside. That was what the emperor had sat on when he came. The second prince ran over, out of breath. Clambering up into the carriage, he shouted. Get lost. Get lost. Didn't you guys see it? I am the emperor. I am the emperor. I am the sovereign emperor. Ha 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 ha. He finally managed to climb his way up, plopping right onto that seat. Touching and looking around, mouth full of praises. Clapping the armrests of the seat. His face was full of content and insanity. How is it? That feeling of sitting on the throne, it's rather gratifying, isn't it? A cynical voice asked. Gratifying. Ah. Ha ha ha, how could it not be gratifying? Of course it is gratifying. It is too dang satisfying. It's so good I could die. I dreamt for 30 years for this seat. Emperor. The royal throne. I am finally the emperor. The second prince cackled crazily. Extremely overjoyed. Since you've already been gratified, then come down. Jun Moxie suddenly appeared before him. I have already fulfilled my promise. You have already sat on this throne for real. No. I am the emperor. I want to sit on it forever. I will not get off. Over my dead body. The second prince roared hysterically, his eyes turning red. But I only promised to let you sit on it once, not allow you to sit on it forever. Jun Moxie looked at him as if he were looking down at a corpse. Get down. At this moment, a bugle horn went off in the distance. An unusually masculine voice rang out. Prince Equivalent and his son have come forth with their troops to aid the emperor to settle the rebellion. Everyone is to put down their weapons. Those who surrender shall be spared. Grand Preceptor Li brings his troops forth to aid Emperor Yang Huaiyu. To aid Prince Equivalent to restore peace. Everyone put down your weapons. Those who surrender shall be spared from death. The drums banged and bugle horns blared. And like a tsunami, the clops of the horses of the troops could be heard coming from all directions. Prince Equivalent? What is he doing here? Could it be that he also wants to become emperor? No. This throne is mine. It is mine and mine alone. Whoever fights me for it shall die. Kill him. Kill him. Emperor? You're not even worthy. While the second prince was still screeching away arrogantly, Jun Xie had already caught him by his neck and lifted him off the ground. With a casual toss of his hand, the second prince flew a few hundred meters away, landing heavily on the ground and causing the puddle of blood on the ground to splash about, fresh blood flowing from the corner of his lips. The second prince had always been lacking in his qi and blood due to his lascivious ways. His physical strength was even worse than any regular young man. He was really lucky to not have died after being tossed like this by young Master Jun. But it seemed like it was completely impossible for him to pick himself back up again anymore. Men! Capture this lawless rebel and traitor who killed his brothers and his father, the Emperor. Present him to Prince Equivalent. Everyone else, put down your weapons. If anyone defies this order, they shall be executed accordingly for the same crime. The person who hollered this sentence gave everyone an even greater shock. This person was young Master Li Yuran. The person who assisted the second prince to accomplishing his goals, instigating the second prince to kill the first prince. The person would have gotten the greatest benefit out of this snatching of the throne. What exactly was going on? The change in situation was so peculiar that it was incomprehensible. Prince Equivalent's troops came rushing over from all directions like a looming mountain. The troops of both sides present had no fighting powers and no desire to fight, so they gave way at once. The conclusion was set in an instant. The son of Prince Equivalent, little devil Yang Mo, sat upon his steed and looked at Jun Moxie, who stood in the center of the rebellion troops. His eyes were full of emotions and gratitude. All this was impossible to have occurred naturally. But because of this brother Moxie, who, with a turn of his palms, commanded the clouds and rain and completely overturned the Tian Xiang Empire that was under the rule of Yang Huaiyu. And more unexpectedly, this fulfilled the wishes of father and me. Jun Moxie grinned and winked at him. But it was not a good time for the two of them to catch up right now. Li Yuran, donned in his white robes, had already come down from his high chair and walked over to Jun Moxie in an unhurried manner. Jun Moxie grinned and walked forward to meet him midway. Revenge was over. It was time to leave. The entire place was in a state of chaos. No one saw, or perhaps even noticed, when Jun Moxie and Li Yuran had already disappeared without a trace. Aristocratic Hall. Chief Auctioneer Tang Yuan looked on, completely stupefied, at the two people he never thought he would ever see walking together. Jun Moxie, Li Yuran. In Tang Yuan's mind, as long as these two people met, they'd either be mocking and ridiculing each other, or engaging in a fight. Now they were walking in together, shoulder to shoulder, like good buddies. How could Fatty Tang not be in shock? Tang Yuan looked at them blankly, raising his head up to look at the sky, trying to check if the sun had risen from the west side today. Then, he rubbed his eyes aggressively and let out a weird cry. Sucking in a breath of air that made his belly tremble, he spoke with great difficulty. I really am not dreaming. When did the two of you get together? Jun Moxie couldn't hold back his laughter. Why? Is it weird? Fatty Tang's mouth hung open, and he seemed like he was on the verge of going mad. Is it not weird? How did you, the two of you? Li Yuran also laughed. Tang Yuan, some things may not be as real as you see it. Just like today, I am able to walk into this aristocratic hall with third young Master Jun. But do you know that I do not have any confidence that I am capable of stepping out alive? Tang Yuan widened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. Then that's good. That's good. With all his self-restraint and upbringing, even Li Yuran couldn't help but roll his eyes when he heard this sentence. This fatso is too unreserved. Is hearing that my life is in danger something worth you getting so happy over? Jun Moxie looked at Li Yuran with a smile on his face. Fatty, come along too. He headed upstairs first. Tang Yuan agreed and followed right after. Li Yuran was the last. His face was completely filled by the sight of that round, fat bum that occupied almost 2/3 of the space of the stairs. The boards of the steps were squeaking beneath their feet. He couldn't help but feel worried that these stairs might just crumble under the weight of Fatty Tang. Actually, Tang Yuan had really lost a great deal of weight. After Jun Moxie helped him with his weight loss, Tang Yuan's managed to maintain his new weight for a couple of days. Then, he slowly gained it again. But finally came to stabilize and kept it at almost 300 jin. Had he not lost any weight, how could he only occupy 2/3 of the space? It'd definitely be completely filled up. Of course, Tang Yuan was already extremely pleased and satisfied with an end result like this. Sun Xiaomei was also very satisfied. Sitting down on a chair in a daze, Tang Yuan looked at Jun Moxie, who sat on the main seat. Then, he looked over at Li Yuran, who was opposite him. He rubbed his head in bewilderment and asked, "Boss, is there a matter?" Jun Moxie sighed. "You scoundrel. You've completely fallen into warm bed sheets and don't want to come out anymore. You've already taken down Sun Xiaomei, haven't you?" Tang Yuan's face beamed with radiance, youthfulness tinting his round face. Grinning, he said, "Third young Master Jun knows me best. But we're already each other's fiancés. So those things, isn't it natural to do? Is it weird?" Jun Moxie coughed and said, "Then you better get around to doing serious business. If a little fellow pops out before your marriage, then it'd be bad. I can foresee that your father-in-law will definitely not spare you. Of course. It'll be within the next couple of months. We have already set the date." Tang Yuan rolled his eyes. "But I know my limits. There will be no such issues. I thank boss for your concern. Right. Your gift cannot be too cheap. Don't listen to all those rumors of me being the god of wealth of Tian Xiang. Compared to you, I am only of small wealth." All three of them burst out into laughter. Li Yuran smiled and looked at Jun Moxie. "You are leaving? You've made your decision?" Jun Moxie had yet to answer when Tang Yuan got anxious. He stood up. "Leave? Where are you going? What are you going to do? What are you leaving? When are you coming back? You wouldn't possibly miss my big affair. Would you?" "Sit down, fatty. Am I not talking to you about this matter now?" Jun Moxie grinned and replied, "Li Yuran. That's right. I'm in the midst of preparations." "So you are worrying. You're so contradicting." Li Yuran smiled cunningly, his finger tapping the surface of the table gently. "You're wondering if it is better to kill me?" Or keep me? If you keep me, then will your little Emperor Yang Mo be able to reign over me? That's right. Jun Moxie laughed in awe. I am thinking about this matter. It is indeed very contradicting. Li Yuran turned silent before slowly standing up. He walked over to the window and said indifferently, "When you suddenly disappeared a couple of days ago, I figured that you had gone to seek your revenge. Because if you didn't manage to come back, then naturally everything was all over. But if you made it back, then that meant that the remaining 6 saints all died in your hands. But when such a situation occurred, the Jun family would have no choice but to leave." Li Yuran looked out of the window and spoke with a sigh in his tone. "I don't know what sort of methods you used to kill off the remaining 6 saints, but you managed to do it successfully. But precisely because of this, the road before you has become a lot narrower. You're left with Tian Fa Forest as your only option. If you don't go, you're bound to be dead. But if you go, you will definitely not want to leave with regrets. And you would not be willing to allow all your prior efforts and arrangements to go into waste. So this matter involving the rebellion of the second prince was done an entire month ahead of my original plans. Take it as my gift to you before you leave. So, from the way you see it, what should I do to you?" Jun Moxie asked finally, after remaining silent for a while. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 799. Arrangements. Your concern is that little child Yang Mo. Or rather to say, what you are concerned about is not really Yang Mo. You are just unwilling to allow your prior arrangements to be destroyed by me. That is all. Li Yuran said in a low voice. With my ability and wisdom, no one can control me. Yang Mo, or his father, Prince equivalent Yang Huainong, are all unable to. They are not worthy. He lifted his head and looked into the distance. But I will willingly allow myself to be controlled by them. If I put it this way, I wonder if you understand what I mean. Jun Moxie nodded his head. Looks like you understand yourself clearly. That's right. The two of us are two different people. We are meant to go on different paths. What you seek, I am unable to find out. But what I, Li Yuran, seek, is merely the worldly affairs of this life, the glory and splendor. What I chase is merely power. For the sake of supreme power, I am capable of doing anything. Why can't I allow myself to be controlled by others for the sake of power? And it is merely a superficial level of control. Li Yuran laughed. All these years, I have always been hiding behind the scenes, coming up with strategies and devising tactics, but I have never revealed myself before anyone. I am capable of being an extraordinary tactician, but the only regrettable thing is that I do not have the presence of a sovereign ruler. My position is most suitable to be beneath only one person, and above everyone else. That is the most suitable place for me. Is third young Master Jun satisfied with my answer? Li Yuran spoke with great determination. Jun Moxie remained silent, but he did not say a single word. Li Yuran stood before the window silently, also not making a single noise. These two people, one sitting, one standing, were as still as sculptures. The atmosphere in the room was shockingly heavy. After a long time, Jun Moxie finally opened his mouth and spoke. Li Yuran, if I really retreat, and the 3 holy lands send people again, what would you do? What would I do? What else can I do? I will just speak the truth as it is. Li Yuran sighed but laughed bitterly. Telling the truth that you had retreated into Tian Fa Forest. They can't pin the blame of letting you leave on me. Can they? 6 out of 9 saints had died in your hands. It is not difficult to tell the level of your prowess. If I had insisted on forcefully preventing you from leaving, then wouldn't I just be behaving like a fool? As displeased as they will be, they probably can't take it out on me, can they? Jun Moxie chuckled. Li Yuran's reply had left him greatly satisfied. He turned around to look at Tang Yuan, sincerity in his eyes. Fatty, do you want to leave with me? I'm afraid that they will come after you and take their anger out on you because of your relationship with me. Jun Moxie couldn't help but genuinely worry for this one and only friend he acknowledged in this foreign world. Tang Yuan's temper is that of one who goes against the norms. Had it not been for the strong and powerful support behind him, he would have suffered many disadvantages very easily. Furthermore, people from the 3 Holy Lands are all aware that Fatty is my friend. If I really leave him behind, he is at the greatest risk compared to anyone else. I am not leaving. I definitely am not leaving this place, Tang Yuan announced simply. Then he laughed. I am not going to a place like Tian Fa. It has been my aim from young to earn all the riches of the world. Today, I am in the progress of successfully achieving this goal. How could I bear to leave? How would I have opportunities to earn money in Tian Fa? I definitely will not go. Though Tang Yuan spoke like this on the surface, he was considering about another matter. Boss, there really is no chance to earn money in Tian Fa forest. But eating and living will need money. If I do not stay behind to support this place, what will you do? Being safe does not mean that you can have it for dinner. Are you going to rob? Even if you attempt to go robbing, it doesn't seem like there's anywhere you can rob from. Jun Moxie was not surprised by Fatty's response. He had already vaguely guessed Tang Yuan's intentions. There was no doubt that Fatty was extremely loyal to him. He was willing to take the risk and stay behind for the sake of Jun Moxie's future developments. Jun Moxie had no doubt about Fatty's efforts on this matter, and he never would. Tang Yuan really did love his money, but as long as Jun Moxie said that he was in need of money, Tang Yuan would definitely immediately empty all his savings and offer them, only keeping an underwear for himself. But on the other hand, Tang Yuan was an extremely realistic person. And he was one who could be content with small wealth. Although what he sought was definitely great wealth, but deep inside, he was such a person. What Jun Moxie advocated was undoubtedly doing as he pleased, determining ally or foe quickly. Whereas what Tang Yuan chased was the same thing, in another form. Tang Yuan adored excitement, liked enjoyment, and loved beauties, and he especially adored the thrill of using money to crush someone to their death. He termed it as his greatest pleasure. And this fellow was extremely lazy. Jun Moxie had once given him a set of skills to practice. But other than the one time Jun Moxie helped him in circulating, he had never picked it up to practice ever again. Not even once did he think of doing it. Bringing a Tang Yuan like this with him into Tian Fa forest, that was as good as cutting off all of the enjoyments and entertainment in Tang Yuan's life. So Jun Moxie had only casually brought it up. Let him continue down the path he has chosen for himself. Everyone had their own destiny. This was a fact that couldn't be forced. He could help his comrade clean up the mess, but he could not help him decide his path. If he forcefully helped him make the decision, no matter what his stance was or what his starting point was, he would have stepped out line. Some people pursue longevity their entire life, for unparalleled martial arts in this world. But some people didn't even hold it in regard. Tang Yuan was someone like this. So was Li Yuran. There was no other reason. Everyone pursed a different goal. It could be glory and wealth, or the influence that allowed one to control and reign, or royal power that caused people to heartlessly kill their own kin. All this was worthless in Jun Moxie's heart. Everyone had their own standpoint and their own values. That was all. Jun Moxie pondered for a while before speaking again. Everyone has their own ambitions. Since you have already set your determination, I will not force you. Later, I will seek the opinion of Hai Chen Feng and Song Xiang to see if they are willing to stay behind and accompany you. With these two experts, you should not suffer any big disadvantages in Xiang City, or even in this entire continent. Tang Yuan's eyes brightened as he agreed. Hai Chen Feng and Song Xiang were already at the level of Superior Supreme. With the help of these two high-level experts, a lot of things would be able to proceed extremely smoothly. And these two people were spies that Jun Moxie had already planted in the continent. But Jun Moxie had said this not only for Tang Yuan, but also for Li Yuran. Li Yuran smiled and said, "Third young Master Jun can rest assured. I may not be a good person, but fortunately, no matter what I do, I will do it only when I know what is going on." Jun Moxie chuckled meaningfully. Well said. Knowing what's going on. This is also one of the reasons why I am not killing you. He paused for a while before continuing. I will speak to Prince Equivalent and his son about you later on. I believe they would not give up a major talent like you. Li Yuran perked up and replied respectfully. As such. Thank you. Jun Moxie's words had significant weight to it. With Li Yuran's talent and wisdom, and the strength of the Li family, trying to rise up in the court of Xiang to occupy a seat was definitely not a difficult challenge. But they would never really be able to sit in the central position of authority. Because Prince Equivalent and his son would always be on the side of Jun Moxie. And in the eyes of outsiders, Li Yuran's family and the Jun family would definitely never match in their tunes. They were forever opposing each other. This would undoubtedly become Li Yuran's greatest weak spot. Even if Li Yuran had strategized and killed Yang Huayu and his sons, contributing greatly to Prince Equivalent, all in all, he had merely decorated something that was already perfect. It would only take a single sentence from young Master Jun to turn all his achievements and contributions into ashes. Similarly, with Jun Moxie's affirmation, Li Yuran's greatest worries were completely driven off and vanished without a trace. It would become a great affair. This would definitely be of invaluable aid to Li Yuran's future career as an official. Oh right. Third young Master Jun. If you are really going to hide in Tian Fa forest, then naturally, outsiders will not be able to go in. Although those Xian beasts in Tian Fa forest cannot be touched, but those rare medicines and herbs. Our aristocratic hall still need to continue operations. Same old rules on the profit and gains, 90 for you and 10 for me. Fatty Tang cackled villainously, quickly coming up with a new scheme to strike it rich. If this proposal had gained the approval of Jun Moxie, then the entire Tian Fa forest would become Tang Yuan's personal treasure bowl. This was literally monopolizing, dominating the market. Although Jun Moxie got a 90% cut, but that remaining 10% was more than enough for Tang Yuan to become the wealthiest person in the continent. Young Master Jun was going to separate from human community from now on. Jun Moxie laughed. You need not worry about this, just relax. I have already made plans. The ratio will also change to 60 for me, 30 for you, and 10 for Yang Mo. This will be better. Otherwise, if only you get to enjoy, while the royal family doesn't even get a bite of the meat, sooner or later, your possessions will be confiscated. You also can't always remain under my protection. Can you? Tang Yuan was extremely excited. Even Li Yuran couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration, which turned into a look of excitement. This is a gigantic piece of cake. Even if the Tian Xiang royal family only gets 10% of the profits, it is still a lot. It will definitely be enough to allow this country to become more populous and affluent than other countries. If it is properly utilized, we may even become the first nation to unify this continent. When the time comes, he would be able to have even greater opportunities to show his capabilities. Be it fighting wars in all directions or every type of the country's domestic affairs. It would all be able to advance smoothly. He would definitely be able to leave his name behind in the historic records. Looks like I will have to improve my relationship with this fatty no matter what in the future. This is truly the god of wealth. And not only in name. The way Li Yuran looked at Tang Yuan turned fervent as he thought secretly. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 800. Princess? Orphan? Alright. I really need to leave. The two of you can perhaps continue to discuss further. Jun Moxie smiled as he looked at Li Yuran. Before we part, I need to be honest with you. From the start, I had no intentions of killing you. Otherwise, I would definitely not bring you here. I know. Besides, I am never willing to take risks. Li Yuran smiled in appreciation. He added in a low voice. Although I believe that in the future, you won't have any use for me, I still wish to say this, if there is a need. I, Li Yuran, will definitely spare no effort. For this conversation we had today. Jun Moxie chuckled loudly and left, making his way downstairs. Behind him, Li Yuran added bitterly. Third young master. I hope that you can take good care of Ling Meng. Jun Moxie couldn't help but freeze for a moment before letting out a deep sigh. Tang Yuan cried in a whiny manner. Third young master. If I miss you, I will need to go to Tian Fa forest to find you. You definitely must not let those huge tigers eat me. My meat is too oily, it's not delicious. Currently, the streets were in a state of tight security. Lines of soldiers and troops walked about in neat rows, surveillancing and patrolling the place. Smoke was still rising from some places in the city, but the scene of screams and chaos from before had already vanished without a trace. Jun Moxie strolled the streets slowly, but no one dared to stop to question him. When he returned home, he was astonished to find an agitated prince equivalent and his family waiting in the Jun residence. The person wielding the political power of the Tian Xiang royal family, the Emperor Yang Huaiyu and his family, had been completely wiped out within the past 3 days. Currently, only Prince Equivalent and his son, as well as Princess Ling Meng, were of royal blood. The country could not be without a ruler for a day, and Princess Ling Meng was ultimately a female. It made complete sense for Prince Equivalent to take over and inherit the throne. No one would oppose this. Furthermore, the emperor and his 3 sons died because of their own internecine strifes. There would be no contention regarding this matter. Jun Moxie briefly informed Prince Equivalent and his son of the situation, especially emphasizing on the matters regarding the Donghua family, Tang family, and Li Yuran. The way Yang Huainon and his son looked at Jun Moxie was undoubtedly as if they were looking at an immortal. Naturally, they agreed to everything Jun Moxie mentioned. In a sense, Tian Xiang Empire now also had the support of a superfamily, and possibly even the #1 fiercest force in the world, Tian Fa forest. Even if there was no substantial assistance, This would greatly benefit their reputation. Why would Yang Huainong and his son dare to go against anything Jun Moxie asked them to do? Furthermore, both parties were already on extremely good terms, and it seemed like the little devil Yang Mo was the third auctioneer of Jun Moxie's aristocratic hall. Aside from this, the Jun family and Blizzard Silver City had already become official in-laws with each other. And with Blizzard Silver City sitting in the magnificent jewel hall of Tian Xiang City, naturally, it would benefit Tian Xiang City greatly as well. This was the best thing that could happen to Yang Mo and his father. It was like tossing a warm biscuit into their cold palms. The same as a gold ingot falling down from the sky and crashing on their heads, putting them in such bliss and happiness. However, there were still many things that still needed to be seen to, and many matters that required tying up the loose ends of. So after conversational greetings, Jun Moxie considerately requested for the guests to take their leave. The upcoming emperor and his son immediately left. Jun Moxie ordered everyone to speed up preparations for the move before returning to his own courtyard. He still had one more thing to do, to wake Princess Ling Meng. In the room, Princess Ling Meng laid quietly on the bed. Under Jun Moxie's miraculous healing hands, she had been recovering quickly, and the external wounds she sustained were no longer any issue. Only the bone injury on her knee and the blood clot in her brain remained unresolved. But Princess Ling Meng had now become Jun Moxie's greatest headache. First, it was the vengeance between her parents, her mother dying in her father's hand. Her dearest uncle Yi also left as a result of the death of his beloved. Now, her remaining relatives, her father and 3 prince brothers, had also all died at each other's hands within the past few days. This prideful girl in the past now became the most pitiful orphan today. She had no one to rely on in this world anymore. If I really woke her up, what would she do? But if I still don't save her and bring her into Tian Fa Forest directly? What is this? Although Jun Moxie did not personally have a hand in killing of the emperor's family, but ultimately, they all died in Jun Moxie's scheme. If young Master Jun had not intentionally manipulated father and son to slaughter each other, he would even do it personally and become the most vicious killer. Just that, although these people were wicked beyond redemption and deserved their punishments, but at the end of the day, they were still Princess Ling Meng's family. The easiest solution right now was to kill Ling Meng with a single strike, and let her pass away in her sleep so she would no longer have to suffer in this mortal realm. But the thought of Empress Murong Xiao and Yi Gu Han's hopes before passing away instantly made the simplest solution into the most impossible choice. But he couldn't just remain in a deadlock like this. Let's leave it to her to choose what path to follow. Jun Moxie looked at Princess Ling Meng, who was in a deep sleep on the bed, and made this decision. Although Princess Ling Meng had been sleeping the whole time, her body had recuperated significantly under the nourishment of spiritual qi during this period of time. Compared to before she sustained her injuries, she was in a much better form now. She should be able to take this much impact. With so many complicated matters that needed to be resolved, there was no room for any further delay. Jun Moxie decided to wake her up. He gently placed his palm on top of Princess Ling Meng's head and activated his spirit energy. And seemingly intangible purple-colored spiritual qi burst from his palm and entered the head of Princess Ling Meng instantly, dissolving into her veins, slowly unclotting the blood clot in her brain. Under the careful control of Jun Moxie, the blood clot in Ling Meng's head slowly dissolved away and became tiny bits of particles that blended into the veins and circulated in blood vessels. When they all moved away from the brain, Jun Moxie utilized his spirit energy again and separated those useless particles from blood vessels and purged it out through the skin's pores. Everything proceeded easily and thoroughly under Jun Moxie's precise control. Princess Ling Meng felt like she had been going through a long and painful nightmare. She had finally awoken from it. She slowly opened her eyes, feeling pain in her eyes from the gentle light rays that had entered her eyes. Where is this? You are. Princess Ling Meng looked at Jun Moxie groggily. Suddenly her eyes widened. Jun Moxie? Where's my mother? My mother and Uncle Yi? They're all right. Right? Where are they? She suddenly sat up, and a sharp pain shooted up from her injured knee. She grabbed onto Jun Moxie's robes anxiously, seeming as though she had not realized her injuries. Princess, your mother, and your Uncle Yi. Jun Moxie looked at the terror-stricken eyes of Princess Ling Meng, and an involuntary wave of grief hit him as he continued in a low voice. They've both already left this world. They're already buried and at rest. Already buried and at rest. Princess Ling Meng repeated this sentence in a daze, seeming as if she had yet to process the meaning of this line. She stared ahead blankly and suddenly recalled everything that had happened before she fell unconscious. Her entire body jerked as she cried and vomited a mouthful of fresh blood. Mother! Uncle Yi, you guys are so cruel. How could you just abandon me like this? How can you just abandon your little Menger like this? Why did you not bring me along? Why did you leave me behind in this cruel world? Her tears were pouring out uncontrollably, and suddenly, she couldn't catch her breath and toppled over and fainted. Young Master Jun instantly transfused spiritual qi and Princess Ling Meng woke up again. She laid on Jun Moxie's lap, wailing loudly. After a long time, she finally asked in a hoarse voice. The culprit, is it him? Jun Moxie silently nodded his head and replied, It is him. Princess Ling Meng's body jerked, her eyes full of unfeigned despair as she mumbled, It's him. It really is him. Then, what should I do? What should I do? This question. You no longer need to think about it. Jun Moxie took in a breath of air and continued. Revenge has already been obtained. The revenge has been obtained? How? Princess Ling Meng mumbled to herself before she suddenly picked herself up in shock. Looking at Jun Moxie with unblinking, teary eyes, she said in a daze. Revenge has already been obtained? You mean that? Jun Moxie swallowed his saliva, feeling for the first time that some things were not easy to say. Revenge is indeed already obtained. The murderer and his sons are all dead, and you have been unconscious for almost 2 months. The murderer and his 3 sons are all dead. Princess Ling Meng was completely lifeless at this point. Whatever Jun Moxie said, she just repeated it to herself. It took a long while before she realized that the murderer and his 3 sons referred to my own father and 3 brothers. Dead? Princess Ling Meng's entire body trembled vigorously. In an extremely weak and hoarse voice, she asked, how did they die? She was slowly snapping back to her senses, and she knew that Jun Moxie would definitely and not make such a terrifying joke with her at this point in time. It essentially went down like this, a couple of days ago. The second Prince Yang Dan suddenly killed the first prince. Then he started a rebellion, and the emperor and third prince activated their troops to suppress him. Both sides engaged in a great battle. Then at the front line of both armies, the second prince first killed the third prince, then killed the emperor, Yang Huayu. Lastly, The second prince was arrested by Prince Equivalent and his troops and beheaded. Jun Moxie shared this in a concise and comprehensive manner. At the end, he scratched his head a little apologetically and looked at Princess Ling Meng, whose eyes were completely in a state of daze, and said, "Of course. I had a bit of involvement in this matter. It was me who instigated the second prince to start his rebellion. This entire matter could also be said to have been single-handedly orchestrated by me, Jun Moxie. I added fuel to the fire. I believe you also understand my reason: revenge. Revenge for my father and my second uncle, my two brothers, and those countless innocent valiant souls who were lost due to this matter." The look in Princess Ling Meng's eyes gradually turned into that of shock. She had even forgotten to weep, only staring at him in astonishment, not making a single noise. "So, your father and the three princes could be said to have all died in my arrangement. There is no difference from that to dying in my hands." Jun Moxie finally finished what he had to say. He calmly looked at Princess Ling Meng. "Today, in your entire blood-related family, aside from yourself, there is no one else still alive." This story will be continued to chapter 801. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.